Taking its time. Okay, we are live. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Nobody Puts Podcast in a Corner. Thank you, everyone who has been sending wonderful feedback over the past few weeks for last week's episode. Obviously, the solo one, that was completely nerve-wracking, but had some really lovely feedback about that, so thank you. And thank you for everybody who's actually been getting in touch and saying that they'd like to come and do an episode and has been suggesting some really great topics. So thank you very much for, again, the continued support. Joining me this evening is Pops, aka Andy. Hello, good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Ross.
How are you?
Fantastic. All the better for being here.
Well, that sounds sincere, doesn't it?
It does.
So, yeah, thank you for being here. We'll come back onto a little bit more of that in a second. But first, I am very, very happy to say that another fantastic local business has decided to sponsor an episode. They're actually sponsoring two. This is the first of two. And that is the Bake Bloke. Very happy to say that Bake Blokes, it was a business that started during lockdown, which is fantastic, run by a friend, Dan. And yeah, it is literally that. It is the Bake Bloke. So, you know, he started this business off from the ground up, just making incredible baked and sweet goods. And I got one of his first boxes when it launched, and I have to say it was divine, absolutely divine. I'm not a massive sweet eater, but it was incredible. But he sponsors tonight's episode with Mother's Day coming up, as my own mum has already hinted to do with this particular. So I think she knows what she's getting for Mother's Day. But yes, so you know, with this coming up, you know, take the hassle out of Mother's Day by ordering, you know, a variety of these baked treats that include, but not limited to, the Biscoff cookie cakes. If you are sensible right now and you've got Instagram or social media and you're listening to this, you'll go onto Facebook or Instagram, you'll find the Bake Bloke, and you will look at his Biscoff cookie cakes. They are mouth-watering. But yes, the always popular mixed boxes, or one of a number of other treats. But place your orders with Dan by messaging on Facebook or Instagram. Thank you again to him for sponsoring today's episode. So, let's get started. We already have people commenting in. Good evening, Rachel. Good evening, Andrew. Good evening, Mum. Hello, James. Some people already saying wonderful things about the Bake Bloke. And yes, the Mother's Day gift. Absolutely. So, yeah. Why we're here tonight. Tonight's episode is called So Back to the Future's a Bunch of Bullshit. That is a direct quote by Ant-Man in Avengers End Game, which was one of my favorite lines, and I felt like it was a great opportunity to throw that in for a title. I mean, myself and obviously you, Andy, have been talking about time travel in films for quite a long time, haven't we? It's always a topic that comes up, and it's always a conversation that doesn't end after a few seconds, and it usually ends with a disagreement as well between us. So that's always good fun. But you know, what better than to talk about it a little bit more in depth in a podcast? So, you know, many films have tackled the topic of time travel, and, you know, many different films have done it very differently too. And we're going to highlight a few films in particular this evening that obviously have tried different styles with their time travel in their stories. So we'll be talking about them. Obviously, please, if you're listening, watching us, live, please comment throughout any thoughts. It's the Bake Bloke himself. Thank you. Great topic. Yes, thank you very much. And thanks for sponsoring the episode. Yeah, we're going to go through a selection of films. Please comment along. Let us know what you think of the films, and let us know what you think about this time travel thing. You know, time travel isn't just limited to films. It's technically a fictional concept so far as we know. But it's something that's the kind of topic that keeps people awake at night sometimes, thinking about, the many different ways in which time travel could and could not occur. There are such things in existence that suggest that time travel has already happened. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Andy, the behind the scenes footage of Charlie Chaplin's The Circus, and there was a video on the DVD commentary. So bearing in mind this is going back 80 odd years, and there was a woman walking and it looked like she was talking on a phone. And it's
I haven't seen that.
You have to something to YouTube. I only just remembered it. I would have asked you to watch it beforehand, but I totally forgot about it until a second ago. A lot of people just put it down to the fact that hearing aids back in that time were very big, and she was probably. But the weird thing was that she was walking alone and she was clearly talking. So there's a lot of things about it that was kind of questionable, but it was one of those things that was just snuck into a DVD extra that on a film that not many people tend to watch anymore, and just happened to be clocked out of the blue, and it kind of took the world by storm. Susie says it was a man dressed as a woman. It did look like a man dressed as a woman.
It's weirder and weirder, doesn't it?
Wouldn't like to speculate too much on that one. So yes, time travel. Let us know what you think of the films as we go through them. So obviously you and me have already had a conversation about the films that we're going to discuss. I'll let you pick one. Let's pick one for us to begin with. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, should we start quite simple and Back to the Future? Yes.
Back to the Future, absolutely.
It's got to be the one that most people know, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the one that obviously is referred to quite a lot when people refer to time travel in films, as the quote of this episode suggests. Yeah. Back to the Future. So, I mean, Back to the Future is an interesting one because it isn't just, let's go back in time. There's 3 films of it, and every single film seems to push it that little bit further. In the end, you find yourself intentionally looking for almost plot holes in the film because you feel like there's got to be somewhere. So Back to the Future. Talk to me about the time travel as you perceive it in Back to the Future. How does it work?
Well, the first one is it goes back to 55, isn't it? 55? Yeah.
1955, yeah.
Accidentally, he gets knocked over instead of his dad, which means his mum starts to fancy him, which not is weird or anything. And then it goes from there. He's trying to get his mum and his dad together because he thinks obviously he will not exist.
Well, and he has the photograph, doesn't he? So he has the photograph of him and his siblings, and throughout the film, the siblings start to fade, don't they? And towards the end of the film, there's a couple of things
wrong with the photo, isn't there? If they were going to fade, he'd be the first one to fade because he was the last one to be born, surely.
Never considered that before. That is a very good point. I did think it was slightly flexible of them with the story to have it that he was the one that happened to go. That's it. Convenient, very, very convenient. It definitely pushes liberties, I think, but ultimately it uses this concept that is the most, I would say, commonly used concept in time travel as a theory, that if you go back into the past and you change something, it therefore changes not just the future, but the future you go back to if you eventually return to said future.
Yeah, but it doesn't, because when he goes back, he's still there, isn't he? Because he's there when Doc gets shot. 2 of them are.
Yeah. He goes back for about a few minutes. Yeah, and then he goes back. He watches himself go back. So it's the beginning of the loop, isn't it? And it kind of ties into the many different theories that obviously you and me have discussed, where you've got time, which is an ongoing circle. It's an infinity loop. It just keeps going round and round and round. And you could be any one number of the many different incarnations that are knocking around in a certain timeline at a certain time. Yeah. Then you've got Back to the Future, which, as far as I can tell, is the first ripple effect. And I say that because whereas in Back to the Future 2, he goes back to 1955, and as you were saying, then there's two of him running around in the same timeline, which is where they both don't belong, and he has to make sure he doesn't run into himself. That doesn't seem to be a problem that he has in the first Back to the Future film. It does feel like there is only ever one Marty knocking around in 1955. Unlike the events of, say, Harry Potter and the Prison of Azkaban, which we'll go on to in a bit, but where there are obviously multiple versions of them in an ongoing loop at all times for the reasons that obviously we'll discuss. So it could be argued that was point one of a potential ripple effect. And as you say, then Marty watches it himself at the end of the film, go back in time. So it could be argued that he was always playing catch up. But then what happens when that Marty that's gone back in time comes back to the future? What version of himself is he going to watch go back to the future then?
Well, this is it. We don't know. We don't know whether once he goes back, that's that timeline gone. We don't know if that's that done. We don't know.
We don't know. You're absolutely.
Then it's just that we're going to be in that timeline where he's gone back and he's with Doc and he's saved him.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, because I suppose it's this concept that he's gone back in time, and because everything's been saved, he would come back to a different version of the future, perhaps. Is that a possibility? Or
that's what he's done in the film, isn't it? He's come back. His parents are, great people. He's an author and all the rest of it. His siblings are both doing good and well for themselves, whereas in the original they were, wasters and all the rest of it, weren't they?
Yeah.
But Marty's exactly the same.
So what? Exactly. That's a good point. Actually, he's exactly the same. So the question is then, what the Marty that Marty watches go back in time at the end of the film when he obviously thinks Doc's been shot for the second time, but he was wearing a bulletproof vest. What version of the events does that Marty come back to? Or does that Marty, is it possible that as soon as Marty gets in the DeLorean and hits 88 miles per hour, he just ceases to exist?
Well, because that line might just go. It might just disappear, that line. Just
vanishes, because time has caught up with itself. So it's possible. But
we don't know.
We don't know. Rachel says it's quite an egotistical view, but that one person going back could change the entire scope for the future. Like, does no one else's present day matter? It's really interesting that you should say that, because I had this thought not too long ago, and I thought, what if you are going back just to sort out your own timeline and you trip over a twig, and that twig is connected to the roots of a tree that then rip up a house, and that house falls down and destroys someone's family. You've just changed someone's entire future just by tripping on a twig, hypothetically. And that seems to be a concept. It is. It's a very dangerous game. Which I think, as Back to the Future very much explores in a bit more of a far-fetched level, obviously in Back to the Future 2, when not only does he have to go back to the past that he was in the first film, where there are then two of him, the reason he's doing it is because somebody took the time machine whilst they were in future, went back to the past, changed the past, and then returned the time machine to them. So that when they went back, obviously they went back to a completely different style of time that they left, which kind of pulls a little bit from the Avengers End Game theory, which is you've created an alternate timeline, and in order to restore that timeline, you need to fix that point that was broken in the first place. So now Back to the Future,
there's still going to be a divergent timeline, though, isn't there? It's well,
it doesn't just not does it is it, or does it just vanish? Yeah, exactly. Let's build a time machine and find out. So well, yeah, I know, uranium, I think. So I'm just having a little bit look at the comments. I will keep up with them in a second, but on that note, obviously, do you have, from your perspective of time travel, do you have a bugbear with the way Back to the Future does it?
Well, just like I say, they haven't done it. That there is loopholes, like I say, with the picture, and the fact that he goes back and everybody else has changed, but Marty's life is exactly the same. He's still friends, strangely, with this old man who lives by himself.
Yeah,
but there you go.
Do you think could it be suggested that the reason that he hasn't been affected by it is because he was the subject that changed that reality?
Well, maybe, but then there's still getting to that point, isn't there? There has to have been of life up to that point. It doesn't just change like that. You know, it's got to go from.
Oh yeah,
like
so yeah, I see what you mean.
You know, you've got point A, B, and when you go back to B, you then start another point, which is C.
Yeah.
So there's got to be that line. There's got to be that line.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Okay, cool. Right, Back to the Future. And then also you got Back to the Future 3, where it's just... I only really thought about recently how much is actually going on in Back to the Future 3. Like, at one point, there are 2 DeLoreans in one timeline, because you've got the DeLorean that Doc puts in the cave.
Yeah.
At the end of the events of the Western timeline, that when he died... And then you've got the DeLorean that's in 1955 that the other Doc helps Marty send back to. And that only occurred to me recently. It only occurred to me that there were 2 DeLorean time machines in one timeline. Yeah, never occurred to me before. Yeah. So, Andrew's just said there is the concept of being the eye of the storm where everything changes around you, which is the point I was, absolutely riding up to a minute ago. However, as Andy says, it's this whole idea that if all your family has changed around you, logically in that scenario, you would have been changed. Your life up until that point would have been different because your family's lives have been different. James makes the comment, I always wonder what happens to other people when the future is altered. Like, if someone went back in time and changed it so EastEnders was never invented, that would be nice. Does an EastEnders fan then randomly wake up and suddenly EastEnders is gone from his mind? I can't answer that, but what I can say is an interesting concept that happens in a lot of time travel films. Also happens, I think, in The Lake House, I think, and a few others, and Looper, is that they suddenly, where they've changed the past, their future selves suddenly develop memories that they didn't previously have. Like, suddenly they kind of go, oh my God, where's this come from? So I suppose it's this idea that if you can grow new memories that have been affected by time travel, you can lose them equally the same way. What do you think about that?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe. It seems a bit strange that one day you wake up and you don't remember stuff.
But you wouldn't know you didn't know it.
No, this is it. It's a bit like another film that we're going to come on to is the X-Men.
Yes, well, and I'm actually really looking forward to talking about that one because that one does it so differently altogether. So should we go on to that one next?
Might as well.
Okay, so I am, for the record, noticing that lots of you are having very deep conversations about time travel in the comments, and I love that. I will highlight a few of the comments. Susie has just said Back to the Future 3 is awesome. It's all right. However, I may not highlight all the comments if you're having your own conversations, just because. X-Men Days of Future Past. Now, as a film, I absolutely love it. I like the idea that I kind of always expected to have like the old cast actually team up with the young cast, but in reality, I'm really glad they didn't. So X-Men does it in a way that I've never known a film to, which is transferring your consciousness from your present future self to your past self. And I have a lot of issues with this. Although I like it in the film, having thought about this, I have a lot of issues with this because technically speaking, as soon as your conscious mind is transported to your younger self, you're going to be changing things straight away, unless you intentionally lead the same memory that you remember doing. And even then, that likely won't happen. But whereas with Back to the Future, Marty was trying to let the past work the way it should have. As soon as you're you, and there's only one you, but it's you being controlled by your future self, you're going to do everything completely different. So events that you did will never happen. And it has such a knock-on effect, a larger knock-on effect as a result, because then you won't necessarily mingle with people you did mingle with, or you won't do things that you did with other people, and thus meaning their lives are going to be affected more so now as well. There's literally no chance that things will go that way because you're doing things completely differently.
Yeah, well, they do change so much, don't they?
So much, like
so
a ridiculous amount.
I don't know how they, from there, the rest of the X-Men films make any sense because it's all been changed from 73.
Yeah, well, I think it's this idea that they were so fed up with the way the other X-Men films had gone that they just decided to pretend like they never existed. But I do think that it's this concept that you have alternate timelines. I do think that's quite a big standing theory that they've gone with, and I think the reason they did it was so that they could kind of like have more liberty, because arguably before Days of Future Past, the story had to go the same way. To lead into the events of the original X-Men films, the story had to go the same way. So you do Days of Future Past, and then suddenly the younger versions of the characters in the original X-Men films can have different stories, because as long as, and this is the thing where a lot of people seem to not really, go a little bit off track with, is I always say, well, the end of Days of Future Past has all the X-Men alive and well, and everything seems happy, and it's a nice future. But then everything that happens in that with those previous earlier characters has to lead into that moment. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. So they set themselves up for a lot of failure, to be fair.
That's what I say. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a strange one, really.
It is. I think, and what was then funny about the X-Men films was then their two sequels that they did after Days of Future Past with the younger cast went and broke the rules of the future that they set up in Days of Future Past.
There you go.
So they completely messed up there. But Days of Future Past is a good film. I do have issues with the whole mind transfer thing, because like I say, you'll never do things the same way again. And that has such devastating consequences. I reckon it'd be easier for there to be two versions of you in that timeline, because at least one version of you will be conscious of the other one and trying not to let, like a bit like, not exactly like Marty in Back to the Future, but at least Marty had Doc ringing in his ear going, don't change the past. Whereas if you're controlling, you're ultimately playing puppet master over your younger self, you can't help but change the past. Even if you go, you wake up and face a different direction, or you use a different toilet, or you eat a different bit of food, you've done things differently, and it can have quite consequential effects. So, okay, that's X-Men then. So, your time to pick a film next.
Time Machine?
Yeah, Time Machine is a good one. Obviously for similar reasons to what we've discussed, but also tackles a different side of time travel altogether. So I know you know what that is. So talk to me about Time Machine.
Well, we're talking about the remake with Guy Pearce, yeah? We're not talking about the original.
Yeah.
The original only goes into the future, so there's no real problems with that.
No, absolutely.
Guy Pearce and his then girlfriend get engaged.
Yeah.
He takes her into the where they're going. They were going somewhere for a walk anyway.
Into the park
for a walk.
Yeah.
She gets shot. She gets shot by a mugger and dies, obviously. And he's so racked with guilt that he's caused her death and she's died. He goes away and builds a time machine to try and go back and save her. He goes back and she still dies.
And again.
4 years. 4 years later. That's 4 years he took to build it. And he goes back and she gets run over by a carriage or something, doesn't she? A steam carriage or something.
Yeah.
And
so every time he goes back, it changes, doesn't it? It changes, but she dies at the same time.
Like he says, because I wrote it down, I could go back 1,000 times and see her die 1,000 different ways. I can't change the past. But that's what he tried.
I always thought about this. What if he just built a time machine big enough to fit her in and just grabbed her and put her in the time machine and then took her out of the loop altogether? That would be the only logical way to save her, wouldn't it?
It would be, but they didn't do that.
There was only one seat in that time machine.
Yeah, that's it. It was only built for one person.
He didn't really want to save her, let's be honest. He was just having a laugh.
He just wanted to build a time machine.
Exactly, and he just
needed
thought,
a reason.
Exactly. It's an interesting point, though. It's this idea that you as someone trying to change something, that it doesn't matter how many different timelines you go to, the events will still happen. They might happen in a different way, but a fixed point in time, such as death, where there is death, there will always be death. And that is an interesting concept. I'm not sure I agree with it, though, because that suggests that there's a bigger power at play, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I might be reading into that a bit much, but it's this whole idea that if you can bend the laws of ultimately space and time to travel to a different point in time, then you should be able to change everything else around it.
Yeah, you should.
But just not at the time.
If somebody's supposed to die, they're going to die, aren't they?
True, but at what point? I mean, the thing is that she died. If she had died because she had developed a terminal illness, then that's different, because her body was always going to go that way. Don't matter what timeline she's in, or what, however many different ways. Unfortunately, that's the way it's going. However, she died in an accident. It was an unnecessary death. So it's suggesting that fate and destiny played a part in it, because every time she died due to it being a tragic accident. I think even in one of them, I would distinctly remember this shot of him being in one of the timelines and the moon was falling apart. Do you remember that?
It's in the future, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Yeah.
It's in the future. Yeah.
But it's interesting that, I sit there and think, well, I guess it does make sense, because, if she's going to die, she's going to die. But it just suggests that was always decided to be her point in time, that she was going to die, and nothing he can do will change that. It's interesting, though, that the world changes around to suit that death. So she didn't die by getting mugged in a park the second time. She got hit by a carriage.
Yeah, so when they went for a different walk, he took her somewhere else, didn't he?
Stop taking her for a walk, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you think about it from a completely, even an out of the box film point of view. You kind of sit there and go, well, it was then allowed to happen that she died a completely different way, but she still died at the same time. So the world, it's almost like Final Destination. Death catches up with you one way or another.
Film.
Yeah. So good film though. I actually really like Time Machine.
Oh, it's a good film. Yeah,
it's a good film. It's a bit underrated.
With it, though. There is problems, because, like I said, he stops and buys some flowers, and then asks her to marry her. Yeah, and then instead of going to get the flowers, he just gets her and takes her into town for a walk. Yeah, get her away from the mugging. Yeah, well, they go past the shop where he buys the flowers. And that's when the carriage comes along and hits her. But in the original, before he bought the flowers, he stopped that carriage.
Right. Okay.
So if they were there at the same time, he should be there stopping him in the original. Yeah,
that's true. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. No. Okay. I can buy that. Yeah. I had never considered that before. You've thought about this a lot.
He stopped the carriage in the first place, and then in the second one, why didn't he stop the carriage?
Because he had more important things on his mind. I don't know. I don't know.
The original person, the original Guy Pearce, should have been there at the same time.
Oh, that's what you're saying. Oh, okay. But because he, okay. I was about to say, but because he went back in the time machine, why would he be there? But it was in the past. So unless it's this idea that if you go back in time, you go back into a different timeline. But then you would still surely, if you're trying to save the girl, you'd surely run into your past self no matter what, wouldn't you?
Well, you would do, wouldn't you? Yeah.
That's a really good point, actually. Never considered that. The fact of the matter is that his past self still should have been there. Yeah. Interesting. And I bet you that probably applies to a lot of these films that we're going to talk about.
Probably. I don't know. It's just one that I've noticed,
Yeah, no, a very good point. Well, let's then talk about the next one, which is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. However, before we do, I am just going to have a quick look at the comments. Lots of people talking about changing timelines. Lots of great debate going on in these comment sections. So loving that, absolutely loving that. Nice conversation, guys. We'll leave you to it. So Harry
They're
Potter
not
and the
listening
Prisoner
to
of
us or saying.
I think they are. I think we've inspired them to go into a massive debate, which is quite good. I'm enjoying seeing the comments. So Harry Potter Prisoner of Azkaban is an interesting one because it does, for me. Now there are many loopholes with the theory, but it's the one where it kind of acknowledges that if you go back in time, you're always going to be there. There's not going to be so throughout the events of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, strange things kept happening. Like I think a pebble went through a window and they couldn't work out where it came from. And they heard rustling in the bushes and they looked and they thought they saw someone but couldn't quite tell. And it turned out, as the film story went on, that they were the ones that went then back in time and had to try and help their past selves, even though we'd already actually realized that they'd been doing that already throughout the film. So it suggests there's this endless loop going on. Like, no matter what, there will always be a version of them, two versions of them in one timeline at the same time. And when one leaves, the other enters. And I quite like that theory. It's always been one that I've kind of gone, do you know what? I unless I'm missing something really obvious, I can quite get behind that.
Yeah, Harry thought he saw his father as well, didn't he? But it was him.
But it was him, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Hermione said as well, she turned around and she went, I thought I saw, and then she was going to say myself, but she didn't, and there were close calls where, they must have thought, oh my God. But obviously the reason they went back in time was to save the creature thing. But yet the irony is, through clever filmmaking, it suggests in the first version of the timeline that the creature, Buckbeak, sorry, that was what it was called, Buckbeak, was killed. But it wasn't. It was just made to look like he died. In fact, they'd already saved him. So they'd already got him out. So we were just seeing it from two different points of view. That it may as well be one timeline. There may as well just be 6 individual people working at but it's just because they went back in time and they were helping themselves from a different perspective. And then it reset, they carried on, and they went back in time and they went, and I think it's the one that I buy the most, if I'm honest.
Yeah. There's a few issues with it though.
Such as
not just the time travel bit, but Hermione's got this time turner. That's it. And all she uses it for is to do more work. How much of a blooming what is this blooming girl? Why didn't they just go back and kill Voldemort when he was a baby or something?
Baby Hitler. Yeah, absolutely. No, yes. I'm still chuckling over the titty twister thing. Sorry.
Wrong film.
No, it's like no, wrong film. Yeah. Yes. You're right. It's the fact that Dumbledore or whoever, or Maggie Smith or whatever, felt the need that they could trust a 13-year-old school pupil with a time traveling device. But yet, you're right. Didn't sit there and feel the need to use it to go back and stop Tom Riddle when he was a kid before he became Voldemort. I mean, it's a very good point. It's a very good point.
And if Voldemort's that good, why hasn't he got one?
Again, very good point. And also, what happened to the Time Turner after Prisoner of Azkaban? Why did it never play a part in the films ever again?
Dumbledore said, "Buggy, you ain't having that again."
You know what? You've raised some very good questions. Any Harry Potter fans, Rachel, was that tit twister? Yes, that was he said a titty twister instead of a time turner. That's what you did correctly here. Yes, I would be curious to any diehard Harry Potter fans, like who literally, who know it inside out. And I'm sure the books give a little bit more logic to it. But there must be, as soon as you start introducing something like time travel into things, you make a good point. Oh, Amelia. Hello, Amelia. Amelia says, I think they can only go so far back, but not 100%. That's fair. Maybe it expires after 24 hours or something like that. But still, though, well, then why didn't they use it in Order of the Phoenix when Gary Oldman got zapped and killed? Quick, Hermione, pull out your time turner, go back 5 minutes, and just move out the way. If
they had gone back and killed Voldemort when he was a child, we wouldn't have had to put up with 5 more films, would we?
That is fair. That is more than fair. Oh, Amelia's Googled it. 5 hours. Okay, fair enough. But still, yeah, you're right. If they had gone back in time, it would have saved us a lot of films. So yeah, but from a time traveling point of view, with the way that it loops around, do you find it an acceptable way of doing it in comparison to other films?
It is a good concept that, you know, they're going back, and the fact that they nearly see themselves, you know, and they can't quite make it out. They know there's something wrong, but they don't know what it is, you know.
Yeah, the risk factor is very much there. And from a film point of view, it's adding to this mystery only for us to realise. Because at that point in the film, we didn't really have reason to suspect there was time travel involved, only for it to then be a nice little surprise 2/3 of the way through when they go back in time, relive the whole film, and we actually see it from, like I say, from a different perspective, which I found quite refreshing. It's just a shame. I think that the film itself is pretty shit. So, but that's a story for another day.
Even Gary Oldman can't save it.
No, and hey, look, I love Gary Oldman in it, and I think his character is fantastic, and I just think there was too much wrong with that film. Anyway, I'm looking at the list. What about let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about Shawshank Redemption. I'm joking. Let's talk about the Terminator.
Terminator.
Good old Terminator. So I've summed up Terminator in one small sentence here, which is future sent back to past, which created future. That sums it up, doesn't it?
That's it. That is about it, really.
Yeah. So obviously you and me had a conversation about this a few weeks ago. So I've got to get the names right because I always get mixed up. But John Connor, leader of the revolution in the future.
Yeah.
Against the machines.
Skynet, or whatever it's called.
Skynet, yeah. Sends his friend and war companion, Kyle.
Is that his name? I don't remember it.
Yeah, his name's Kyle. I thought Kyle something. I can't remember. But anyway, Kyle, back in the past to protect his mother, because the Terminators have also worked out how to get back in the past. And they realise that if they kill Sarah Connor, it will wipe out John Connor, and the machines won't ever have to fight against, John and Kyle and all of that lot. However, when Kyle is back in the future protecting Sarah Connor, they have some fun, and as a result, John is born.
I don't know how that does that. You know, sneak a bit of cock in that time, and she gets pregnant with the one that's, sending him back. How's it work? I don't get it.
So it all begins now. We go back and we talk about Harry Potter and it always being in an endless loop, but that one doesn't really work for me because the time travel came from the future. So the person was never from the past. He always existed in the future. The future came secondary. So John Connor's father was his mate from the future, but it actually hurts my head trying to explain it because it just doesn't make sense, does it?
Well, not really. It doesn't. The only way she could get pregnant is if he went back. But how did John send him back? Because John wasn't born because she didn't get pregnant by him.
Because she wasn't pregnant until him. Yeah, exactly. Oh. The only way that I suppose it could be borderline explained is if you look at it from a non-past, present, future point of view, and you just look at them as points in time. But even then, that still doesn't change the fact that you had to go backwards in order to go forwards, and it's a mess, and it doesn't make, for me, and you know what, I should have done a bit more homework on this particular film to try and see if there was any theories that explained how this was able to exist. But ultimately, as we've just discussed, that is the crux of it. The future created the past that the future came from, which just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. But I looked into some of it, and they come up with something called an end jump or something, and I couldn't get my head around what they were trying to explain. I didn't get it at all. Either that, I just didn't want to get it. I don't know.
Maybe a bit of both. It's an interesting way, and I hopefully there might be a few people listening to this, whether it be now whilst we're doing it live or in the future when it's on Spotify, and you might be thinking, no, this is an easy explained thing. If you are one of those people, at whatever point in time you're listening to this podcast, even if it's in 100 years, message me and message Nobody Puts Podcast in a Corner and tell us why this makes sense. Why did James Cameron think this was an acceptable way to make a film?
And if you can do that, you should be sitting here instead of me.
No, don't say that. Don't say that.
Do it next week.
Next week. Just do exactly the same thing. Literally, same conversation. Everything different. Yeah. Shane. No, he sent his best friend back in time to shag his mum. Yes, he did, and thus created him. Thank you.
That's weird in itself.
Yeah, exactly. Shane was answering. So I haven't seen Terminator. Rachel says, but my understanding is right that he shagged his own mum. No, that's not what happened, Rachel.
No, that's a different film.
That's how Back to the Future almost went. And as Shane then says, no, he sent his best friend back to protect. I think that's the more important word. Protect his mum, so that he could stay existing in the future, and actually, as a result, created his existence. It's very messed up. Anyway. Andrew says, look at it as a closed loop system. It opens at Kyle coming back and closes when John sends him back. Yeah, okay, I get what Andrew's saying. It goes back to the whole idea that it isn't the past, present, and the future. It's just points in time, and it is a closed circuit. But from the point of view of past, present, and future, it still just doesn't add up, does it?
No, if it'd been the past and gone to the future, then it would. But going from the future to the past, it just doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. So, all right, here's Rachel's made a comment. Well, he didn't do a good enough job at protecting, did he? Yes. So here's a question.
She survived.
Yeah, she survived. But let's just say when they did have sex, he wore protection, using the operative word here. Would that mean John would have been erased from the future?
Well, if they hadn't have done it at all, then probably, yeah. But then he wouldn't have been sent back.
But he didn't send him back and say, when you go back in time, you have to make sure you have sex with my mum.
Yeah.
So what if he hadn't have? But then that suggests that always happened, because he didn't go back with that directive. He went back and he slept with her anyway, thus creating. So it's this idea somewhere behind the scenes that was always the loop that was meant to happen. He was sent back to protect her, created John, even though he wasn't told to. Like, John didn't say, you must go back in time. Hi, Dad, by the way. Go back in time and make me. But then I suppose the question always would have been, when John was growing up, if he asked the question of who's my dad, what would Sarah have said? Man from the future.
You'll meet him later.
You'll meet him later, yeah.
Just send him to me.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's Terminator. Still none the wiser, but at least we've discussed it. One that I find quite interesting is Deja Vu. The Denzel Washington one. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, it's a good film. It's a good concept as well. Another good concept.
Yeah, so I haven't seen it in a long time, so correct me if I'm wrong, but is it ultimately the fact that there ends up being two versions of him in one timeline?
Yeah.
Yeah, and his future self sacrifices himself to to change the events to save the ferry. But then we think he's dead. Oh no! And then his normal past self or present self, whichever way you want to look at it, turns up at the end.
Yeah, because he's trying to save the girl. I don't think he gives a toss about the ferry. He's more worried about the girl.
Yeah. So it's almost the reverse of Back to the Future, because in Back to the Future, if you mess up the past and say, for example, say for example his parents didn't sleep together or whatever, then he would have erased him from his present. But in Deja Vu, it's the other way around. His future self goes back, sacrifices himself, and his past self is still able to continue and live a life. So, I mean, is this a concept that's always going to be the way that what happens? Is he going to be stuck in a never-ending loop?
Well, I suppose no, because hello, hold on. Yeah, I suppose he would.
Yeah, because his future self no longer exists. So there is a point in time where he doesn't exist that eventually he's going to play catch up with. But I guess the series of events would go differently because he actually changed the past. So his present self is allowed to have a slightly different future. Could that be argued that that's the way it goes?
Yeah, but then you've got the other thing that once he gets up to where he should have been investigating it, he doesn't come back, does he?
That's true, because obviously it doesn't need to be investigated anymore because it was saved. So at that point, I don't know. It's a good concept. It's a good concept. Yeah, it does. I suppose it's this idea that you're changing. If you sacrifice your future, does it really have any real impact on anything?
Not if there's another person or another you to take your place.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder what would have been
with himself at some point, won't he?
But yeah, exactly, and that was what my kind of like theory was. That if he's going to catch up with himself from that point in the future at some time, however, because his future self changed the actions of the past, his past self shouldn't really feel the need to go down that road. But then there's got to be a point where, as you say, he doesn't start doing the things that led him to that point in the first place. Yeah. But
as I say, that present person doesn't know anything about the past that's just happened. He doesn't even know who the girl is.
That is true. But
she does. She knows everything that's happened and what he did.
Yeah,
it's almost conversation, like, isn't it?
Yeah, he's almost going to be like, "Here's one I made earlier." I agree, but good as far as time travel theories go. Bit different, bit more refreshing, and I like the idea that it relies on the future to save the present, opposed of the present messing up the past. But then I guess there's always every present to a past is always going to be a future ultimately, isn't it? So
it's a good film. It's a good film, and plus for you, it's got Val Kilmer in it. So
I know he plays a detective, doesn't he? So not that I remember him much in it, to be honest, but you know, like I do quite remember Denzel Washington in that because he was very, very good, I have to say.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's talk about Interstellar.
Oh, here we go.
Because I don't have a lot to say about this. On my notes, I've obviously got every film, put a sentence or two, and I've got to Interstellar, and I've just got Interstellar, no fucking clue. So I don't get Interstellar. I never have. I don't think I ever will. I think it's an arrogant film, as I've said to you before. It almost expects you to have an understanding of things that I just can't get my head around. But talk to me about Interstellar from what you perceive it as.
Well, I don't know a lot about it myself because I only really watched it recently, and I didn't get it either. But the Earth is dying, so they decide to send these ships out to see if they can go to different places in space to find different worlds. And through a wormhole or whatever it is. And they send 10 ships out and only 3 send back a beacon to say they've survived. Black hole stuff.
Black hole stuff.
And then they send Matthew McConaughey and somebody else goes with him, I think.
Don't remember.
Oh, yeah. What's her name does?
Anne Hathaway.
That's him. That's the bloke. And they stumble upon Matt Damon, of all people,
basically playing the exact same role that he played in The Martian.
Yeah, but they say that they're not connected in any way whatsoever, apparently.
Yeah, and yet they came out like a year apart. I'm just like, what are the odds? Matt Damon agrees to play the same role twice in the space of 12 months. Yeah, whatever.
But somehow they end up, or Matthew McConaughey ends up back on Earth, but not on Earth. He's behind his own bookshelf.
Yeah, which is where I really started to get lost.
Yeah, He's trying to send messages to his daughter through this bookshelf. I don't know. You know,
No, I don't know.
I just keep picking the books up and putting them back. I don't know how you know a message from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it wound me up because I felt like people who understand the concept of, I think it's wormhole theory and the bookshelf in space or whatever it's called, you know, they would go, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. This film makes sense, you know. But whereas a lot of people with Inception said, oh, I didn't get Inception. I perfectly got Inception. It was just a layer. It was just Inception is just about layers. Whereas Interstellar is about like, I just don't know. I just don't get it. I can't even try. If someone says to me, like, talk to me about Interstellar, I can't because it just doesn't make sense.
No, it's just on a loop, though, isn't it? It's going to be on a loop because he's going to be doing the same thing all the time. Because he's behind the bookshelf telling them stuff, so then he goes into space and then he gets sent back again. He's behind the bookshelf and then he's back up again. It's just going around in an eternal loop, and I don't get it.
No, I agree, and I don't agree with the film either. So, okay, at least we've tackled it. It would have been one of those films if we hadn't discussed. Someone would have said, "Oh, why didn't you talk about Interstellar for?" Well, there you go. You're happy now. Lake House, bit of Keanu.
Right, yeah.
Now, Lake House is interesting because Lake House doesn't necessarily have people time traveling, but it does rely on the concept of time travel to change events.
Yeah.
So talk to me. I mean, I've summed up Lake House in the simple sense of the letters from the future determine the past and it changes the already written events.
Right.
That's what I took from
it. Sandra Bullock is in 2006. She leaves the Lake House.
Yeah.
She leaves a letter in the post box for the next person that's going to come into the Lake House, which turns out to be Keanu Reeves. Yep. Keanu Reeves gets the letter and doesn't understand the letter because, according to him, the house has been empty until he goes into it. And it turns out that
paw prints on the pavement or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'll get into that. And
sorry.
It turns out that Keanu Reeves in 2004, and she says something about there's a box in the attic and there's paw prints on the bridge that leads up to the house, but there's none of them there in 2004. There's no box, there's no paw prints, and they start communicating through letters in this post box.
Yeah,
and there's a dog that's in both timelines from what I can work out. He's in 2006 and 2004. I don't know how the bloody hell he does that.
Don't remember the dog being in the future. I remember him being in the past, but I don't remember him being in the future. But that could just be me.
The dog was with her in 2006, wasn't she?
Oh yeah, but then because she said in the letter the paw prints were already there before she moved in, so it couldn't have been her dog that caused them.
No, but it was the dog in 2004 that caused them. The dog just turned up in 2006.
Ah, dog is time travel. Maybe the dog represents time travel.
Maybe it's the one that's time traveling. There's a dog.
Maybe the dog jumped into the letterbox. Who knows?
Yeah, he's writing a letter out.
You open it up, he's got like a little candle and a quill in there. It's like, fuck off, I'm writing.
It shuts the door again behind him.
But yeah, so ultimately, because then Keanu Reeves' character dies, doesn't he?
Well, at the beginning, there is a man killed by a bus. And Sandra Bullock tries to save him, but he dies anyway. And it turns out that is Keanu Reeves. So at the end of it, she figures this out that it's him that was going to get run over. So she goes back to the lake house and putting letters in, trying to get him to not go to try and find her in 2006. And it turns out she says, wait for me in 2008 at the lake house, which is when it is, where she is, in 2008, because Keanu Reeves now in 2006. Yeah, don't try and find me in 2006. Come to the lake house in 2008. And she's there and she's put all these letters in, and then all of a sudden he turns up. Happy ending.
Exactly, it is. I remember it being a happy ending. Like I think they hug or kiss or whatever, and that's it. The film ends. And it's like, oh, okay, so we're just going to ignore the fact that we've got a time traveling letterbox here. But okay, so from a theory point of view, how does this film's breaking of space and time sit on your table of acceptance?
Well, it's letters, isn't it? How can a letter do it? And plus, halfway through the film, they start having conversations over these letters. She says one sentence, you can hear them. There's a voiceover of them saying a sentence, but they can't really do that in a letter. She's walking about and seeing this stuff. She can't say it in a letter. Oh, this, and then it comes back straight away. She's got to go back to the fucking lake house, come all the way back, and then get the message. It just doesn't work that way. With some of it, it's a good film. It is a good film.
It is, from what I remember of it. It is a good film, and I think it was. The problem is the film is a rom-com. It's not really a rom-com, is it? It's just a romantic drama.
It's a romantic. Yeah,
it's a romantic drama that relies on time travel as such to be its kind of story driver, but it doesn't actually address. If that were me, I wouldn't be chatting a guy up from the past. I would be going, oh my god, my letterbox can communicate with the past. We need to do something more important with this.
Yeah, they're trying to get you into bed.
Exactly. So it's I think that would have been a better version of events in the film, but whatever. So okay, Lake House though is a good film. If anybody watching this hasn't watched it or listening to this, do watch it. It's a good. All of these films are, to be fair, apart from Interstellar. Okay, we haven't spoken about. Have we spoken about Avengers End Game yet? We haven't, have we?
Not really. We touched on it, didn't we?
Yeah, no, we'll come back. Okay, well, let's go from one Sandra Bullock film to another. Premonition. Now, I find Premonition really, really interesting because Premonition isn't necessarily a time travel film. It's all more about Final Destination style shit. However, the concept that I love in Premonition is this idea where she gets a vision of the future, and by trying to prevent that vision, she causes it. It's simple because it's this idea that it's always going to happen, and no matter what you try and do, that's it. You're causing it,
You're the one that's caused that. Yeah.
So, and you had a vision of the future because that's what happens no matter what. By trying to prevent it, that was always meant to happen. You were meant to have that premonition that then caused that future. So it's a bit out there, but it's quite simple, I guess, when you think about it. And I love this idea. I love this idea at the film because I'll never forget that. It's that whole car stuck in the middle of the crossroads and the lorry just comes along and hits him. And she's running towards him down the road going, oh my God, I still couldn't save him. Oh shit, hang on. If I hadn't done all this, then he'd still be alive.
Well, he was only turning around because she was there.
Exactly. So that was a kick in the teeth, to be fair, but a clever concept, I have to say. I did really enjoy it. And it kind of links into the time machine a little bit. It's almost like where there is death, there will always be death. It's a fixed point in time, So, Shane has just said there is also a film called, yes, The Time Traveler's Life. We know. We have seen The Time Traveler's Wife. We have discussed The Time Traveler's Wife. We just didn't add it to our list. I find The Time Traveler's Wife a bit creepy, personally, because he rocks up in time for the first time when she's a little girl. She's like 5 or 6. And then he keeps coming back to see her as she gets older. And I just find that a bit like grooming. I don't know.
But he can't control it, can he?
No, but still, no need to end up sleeping with her. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that is a bit weird, but we've had some weirder ones so far. We're going to go, if we go on to one of them, we're going to have a really weird one.
I'm wondering what one that is. What one's that?
Predestination.
Oh, you see, I haven't seen that. So that one's going to be over to you, but we'll head on to that in a bit. Also, I knew this would get mentioned, so thank you, James. About Time. I haven't seen About Time, but have you?
Yeah, it's a good film. It is a good film.
Is it?
The time travel in it is quite good because it does change stuff. If you go back, stuff changes in the future. Whereas a lot of these, nothing's changed. Amazing. It's like he tries to save his sister from getting together with the bloke that ultimately does bad things to her. So he goes back, and when he comes back, the son, the daughter he's had, is now turned into his son because he's gone back. And obviously, the sperm wasn't exactly the same, so it's not going to be the same child.
Absolutely, and that's cool. I like that. So it's this idea that if you go back in time, you are going to change a lot of things in your immediate surroundings, you know, which I like. I didn't know that. That's made me kind of want to give that a go now.
That's a good film. It's worth a watch. It's worth a watch.
James says, I saw it on a date once, so it has happy memories for me. Well, that's sweet, James, and that's nice.
Was that a happy ending as well?
or was that I want to go back in time? Okay. Susie, oh god, he said sperm now. Yes, he has said titty, twister, cock, and sperm. This is going well.
I haven't used the other one yet.
Oh no. Okay. Let me just have a look at the comments. Again, lots of people talking about different things. So, okay. So let's move on to Predestination, because we mentioned it a second ago. So all I know about Predestination is it's a time travel film with Ethan Hawke. That's it. That's all I know.
Ethan Hawke is hold on, what do they call him? I did write it down because it is confusing. A temporal agent. So he goes back in time to change stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But he's sent back. All right, where are we going to start this? There's a child born called Jane, and he goes back and kidnaps her and takes her to 1945 to an orphanage. Yeah. Then we go to, oh Christ, I've got to try and figure this one out. He meets a stranger in 63 he meets a stranger. There is a bartender in 78. There I go, we start there. He's a bartender in 78, and he meets this bloke in the bar, and he starts telling him a story about, you know, if I'll give you a really weird story, will you give me a bottle of whiskey? And the bloke says, you know, the bartender, which is Ethan Hawke, says, yes, fair enough. So he starts telling this story about when he was younger, he was a girl. And he gave birth to, he got pregnant, gave birth to the child. And because he's got both sexual organs, after he'd had the child, the doctors changed him to the man. Yeah?
Okay, yeah.
So he's now a man. He was a woman, had a child, then he's a man. And then he meets up with Ethan Hawke, and Ethan Hawke figures out that he knows who the person is that ruined their life, because she got pregnant by this man, and the man just disappeared when she got pregnant. And so it sort of ruined her life. Yeah, but it ruined her life because then she became a man. She wasn't a woman still. So I'm not explaining this very well, I've got to say. And when Ethan Hawke figures out he knows this person, so he says, if I can take you back and you can kill this person, would you do it? And he says, yes, this person has ruined your life. So he goes back and this man bumps into his old self as a woman. And they start talking. And in the end, they do the dirty. Yeah. And Ethan Hawke says, you've got to leave now. You can't be with her anymore. And he gets himself pregnant. And the baby that Ethan Hawke gets is him. It's the same person. He goes back to 45 with the child.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense, I think.
To a point. But he's got himself pregnant. With his own child, with himself.
Oh, dear.
And it turns out later on that somebody that Ethan Hawke has been trying to catch is this fizzle bomber, and it turns out it is the bloody fizzle bomber as well.
Oh my god! Right,
and Ethan Hawke is the same person as well.
So, do they actually address the way the time travel works in the film, or is it kind of left a bit more ambiguous?
Well, he can time travel.
He can just time travel because it's part of his job.
Yeah, that's what he does.
Right. Okay.
To try and stop people from doing crimes.
Well, you've not made me not want to watch the film, that's for sure. So I'll be adding that to my list.
You've got to watch
I will watch
it. You won't fucking understand it, but you can watch it. It is a complete mind what's it. You know, trying to figure out that Ethan Hawke is the same person he was talking to in the bar, and is the same person as the woman that he got pregnant, and he is the baby.
So basically, this makes Terminator look like an amateur in comparison, really, doesn't it?
Terminator is great compared to this. You know, it's simple. Even a child could get Terminator.
Well, I have to say, since you've been telling this story, our comments have been very much. I'm really interested in watching this film now. So James says this feels like the sort of conversation that would take place at the pub at 1 a.m. just before closing, and then we're the only people in loudly debating time travel, and the bar staff are anxiously waiting for us to leave. But we are having the time of our lives. Yes, you know what? I see that being that kind of conversation as well. But I see it in our version where the bar staff likely get involved because it's that much of an interesting conversation.
I reckon if you're pissed, you might understand it.
Yeah, you know what? Let me have a few more beers and then tell me that story again. And I'll be like, yeah, makes perfect sense. Okay. Rachel, wow, that takes incest to a whole new level.
When you go and tell somebody to fuck themselves, he just does.
He just does. Yeah. Someone somewhere said, "Go fuck yourself," and he went, "Right."
Yeah, so he did.
Have I got a story to tell you? Bake Bloke, our lovely sponsor, has come back and said, "I disappeared to eat, then came back to listen. This was the first comment I saw. What have I missed? You've missed a lot, Dan. You've missed a lot." Yeah, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Go back in time, start this podcast, and yeah. So I've got 2 more films left on my list to talk about. Only one of them really is one that we've actually said we both agreed to, and then we'll mention the other one briefly. But Avengers End Game. So Avengers End Game, obviously, what I like here with what's been done is that they kind of went, right, we are doing a massive blockbuster film in the superhero genre. Time travel's been done to death a million times. How can we make it different? And also, how can we probably make it suit our story? So what they did was they said, right, let's take time travel, and if you go back in the past, instead of you changing things and then going back to that same future, you create a brand new timeline, and you can never return to that timeline because it's your past, ultimately. So no matter which direction in time you travel, it will always be your personal past, and you can never go back to that same timeline without it now being different. So it was a bit more refreshing because it kind of made sense in the respect that, well, you know what? If you're going to muck around with time, there are consequences, and what you're doing is you're ultimately creating loads of different timelines. Like, I think, yeah, as Shane has just said, Doctor Strange saw the future 14,605 times. Like, that's how many different times you can muck around with it.
And he never won. Apparently, they never won, did they?
Apart from one time, 14 million times, and they only did it once. And I'm like, oh, and that's the one that you conveniently go down in the film, you jammy gits. But yeah, so James, maybe someone is listening to this podcast from the future.
I can understand it.
Yeah, I was going to say. I'm hosting it and I ain't got a clue. So Avengers, I found how Avengers did it quite refreshing, and I feel like they broke their own rules a little bit at the end, I'm not going to lie. So spoilers, obviously, as there have been for all of these films, but obviously Captain America goes back in time to put everything back where it came from. And then obviously they go back and I forgot what I was saying. And obviously, old Captain America is there, but it's the Captain America from that timeline. But it's like, well, hang on, you just left, mate. So how can you be there? Because you should have started a new timeline somewhere else. So they broke their own rules just to be able to conclude the film the way they wanted to.
Yeah.
That's the way I kind of took from it anyway.
Like I say, I must admit, this is one of the films I don't know a lot about. I have seen it.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's not one that is really.
It went very much along the lines of what Back to the Future 2 did, where it was this concept where if you change a particular point in time and you can go back and you can put that point back. It should restore that timeline appropriately. That being said, you'll always be the missing link as such. It's this theory that you're always kind of like going back and creating a new timeline. But yeah, I could be wrong. People in the comments, Amelia says the timelines make sense. I don't know what timelines you're talking about, Amelia. Like on Community, when they roll the dice and create 6 different timelines. I have no idea what any of that means, but okie dokie, I will trust that you are talking. Yeah, I don't know. And then Andrew has said, I spoke about this the other day. The fact that a simple roll of a dice creates 6 different timelines.
Dices.
Well, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So it's this idea that dice could have rolled 5 different ways than to the one that you got. So if you'd rolled a 3, but there could have been 5 other. But then that concept works in any element of time travel. I could wake up and make a cup of tea before I have a shower, or I could have a shower before I make a cup of tea, and thus that my entire day could go completely different as a result of that action. You just never know, do you?
That's like the film Sliding Door, isn't it?
It's which film? Sorry,
Sliding Door.
Not seen it.
No, the door shuts and she doesn't get out of the train. But on a different timeline, the door opens and she gets out of the train. So it's a different story.
Ah, okay. I see. Now that's interesting. I wouldn't mind seeing that film. Is that an older film? Or?
Yeah. Gwyneth Paltrow, I think. Isn't it?
Yeah, there's a reason not to watch it. Okay, fair enough. Okay, cool. Sliding Doors, interesting. I feel like I have heard of that. I just don't know why. But yeah, so I obviously we didn't really agree to talk about Looper, but Looper I feel like is an interesting one because I feel like it follows the rules of basic timeline quite normally as such, if that's the right word to use. But interestingly, I was having a conversation with Andrew the other day, and when he made an interesting point, and I've got to make sure I get this right, but obviously in Looper, as we know, your future self gets sent back to the past, where in this particular film, your past self kills you as part of an assassin job. But if your future self escapes, and then your past self gets tortured, killed, beaten up, it affects your future self in the same timeline, because obviously it's your like if you get mutilated, then you'll lose your hand. However, the point that I believe Andrew was making, which I did struggle to disagree with, to be fair, was that, well, that should have always been the case because he always got mutilated. So technically his future self, when he came back, should have been mutilated anyway. He shouldn't have had his nose because that always happened. But then the counterpoint I made was that, yeah, but the timeline has been broken by them existing in the same timelines. But if you follow it from the time going in a constant loop theory, then technically they should have always been mutilated when they came back into that timeline. Or would you see that from a different perspective?
Well, no, because that is his future, isn't it? His future is going to be that. That is it. If it's going to be on a loop, then yes, it is going to be that future. That is always going to be his future.
Yeah, no, to be fair, I think that makes pretty good sense. I think as far as time travel goes in films, I think Looper did a pretty good job, don't you?
Yes, well, there's another one. It's another good film. Yeah.
It is.
It's worth watching. It's not quite as confusing as some of the others. It's all right to watch. So, yeah.
Any notable mentions for any of the time travel films that we haven't discussed today?
No, was we going to talk about Butterfly Effect?
Oh God, I completely forgot about that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Butterfly Effect's great, but again, one that I've seen for quite a few years. But it's the idea that if you ultimately the many different ways a situation can go.
Well, it's another one that if he time travels, something big happens. That is the butterfly effect. If you change something here, something really big over here can also happen. And it does change.
What was it? You said something about a tsunami effect, or
the butterfly effect is that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Japan, it can cause a tsunami in, I don't know, Toronto or something. Or something like that. In miles away, it can cause, something small over here can cause something really big over here. and that is what
absolutely.
the butterfly effect is. And
from what I remember of it, it's a really good film.
It is a good film.
He does something really weird to do with the being born at the end, doesn't he? Like, doesn't he go back into his own?
No, there's two different versions.
Oh, yeah, because I remember having the DVD and there was an alternate ending.
Yeah, there's two versions. Because in the one that I just watched, he's walking in New York. He's changed it. He changed it so that he's not with the girl. He doesn't see the girl from a young age.
He sees her in the street, doesn't he?
And then he sees her in the street, and they pass each other, and they sort of think, do they know each other? But then they
like
carry
deja
on
vu almost.
Yeah.
But
like I say, in the other one, he disappears back into his mother or something. I don't know what happens.
Yeah, he goes back. His conscious mind goes back into when he's in his mother's womb, and he actually wraps the umbilical cord round his neck and stops him and kills himself in his mother's womb, which was just horrific to watch. Yeah, so crazy. I'm glad they went with the other version, for the record. But interesting nonetheless. Obviously, then you've got the Final Destination films. I mean, there's only really one good Final Destination film, in my opinion. That's number 2. But again, Shane has just said, well, I need to watch this. It's a good film. Butterfly Effect is a really good film. I do highly recommend it, from what I remember of it anyway. But then I think I would recommend yeah, because they made a few pointless sequels, didn't they?
3 or 4, I think. I don't know. Sound like that.
Yeah. Obviously, there are films such as Hot Tub Time Machine, Time Cop, other ones that I just can't. I mean, I haven't really seen many of them, actually, so I don't really know. But there are so many films that deal with time. Shane's just mentioned one that we also mentioned the other day, Edge of Tomorrow. Yeah. Good film. That is a good Groundhog Day, though. It's ultimately Groundhog Day, isn't it? I think what I like about Edge of Tomorrow is that it uses the concept of Groundhog Day, but actually gives you an explanation as to why it happens. Whereas Groundhog Day is just Bill Murray's a twat, and we're gonna, make him suffer until he sorts himself out. Rachel says, Final Destination 2, the car crash one. First one made me scared of flying. Second, loved. Third, roller coasters. Yep, that is absolutely right, Rachel. I liked Edge of Tomorrow. Yes.
Oh, you liked it.
I liked Edge of Tomorrow. Martin mentioned... You know what? What's really interesting is I haven't seen any comments come through this evening from any other sources. Sorry, really off topic. I always have, Twitch or YouTube comments come through, but tonight I did think earlier on I've only seen things from Facebook. So if you've commented and you're watching on YouTube or Twitch, I can only apologize. For whatever reason, I have not had comments come through from any of those other sources. How very peculiar. So yeah, I apologize if anyone has commented this evening on Twitch or YouTube and I have not acknowledged your point. I apologize. It's only because I've not seen it. However, Corey mentioned Cloud Atlas. Now, I've seen Cloud Atlas a long time ago, but I just remember it being a very long film, and it was 6 different realities of the same people, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's a good film, but like you, I haven't seen it for years. Very good film.
I need to rewatch that. I would need to rewatch that.
Because Hugh Grant's good in that. Very good in that.
He is, no, very much so. I think that was, to be fair, one of the roles that I remember looking at and going, God, Hugh Grant's really showing that he can act really well after all this spell of rom-coms. So, right, I am quickly just having a look on my Twitch feed because I've realised that I recently changed my Twitch username, and that might be the reason as to why I'm not seeing any comments this evening. So, my apologies.
Come on.
I know, it's terrible. So I'm just having a quick look because somebody may have mentioned something that I have completely missed, and I don't want that to be the case. So welcome to... It's not showing me the comments. Damn it. Oh, well, again, apologies anyone if I missed anything off Twitch, but I will fix that for next time. You have my word. Anyway, so I think that's it pretty much with from time travel films that worth talking about. I could probably think of a few more off the top of my head, but not ones that follow any real different rules to what we've already discussed. So, but as always, if anybody watching or listening to this thinks of something that, you know, can be brought up in a future episode to do with time travel that we've completely overlooked, then please let us know. Just to kind of go over some of the films again from tonight, in case you're wondering, we've got Avengers End Game, Terminator, X-Men Days of Future Past, Interstellar, Harry Potter, Prisoner of Azkaban, The Lake House, obviously the Back to the Future trilogy, The Time Machine, Deja Vu, Premonition, Looper, Predestination, obviously About Time, and The Time Traveler's Wife. About Time is on my list now, along with Predestination. I look forward to giving them a go. Predestination, I don't even know how I'm going to get my head around that.
It gives me an headache just thinking about it.
Yeah. Corey, Bill and Ted. Yes. A bit like Hot Tub Time Machine, though. Uses time travel. Time travel is like the film of comedies. It's a bit like The Whole Lake House. There's the concept of time travel there, but they're not actually using that really to be the driving force of the film. You don't really overthink the time travel element of them.
It's just there, isn't it? You know.
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
a vehicle to have the comedy. Exactly.
James, this might be my favorite episode of the podcast so far. Well, thank you very much, James. I appreciate that. I'm surprised brain hasn't exploded yet, but it's been good. Shane asked a question. What's your favorite time travel film? Is there one? It would have to be one on these lists that we've been talking about. If it was to do with solely like time travel, like a film that not because it's a film that I love and it involves time travel, but if we're talking about it on the basis of it's a film that genuinely is about time travel and that, you know, for that reason, then I would probably say Deja Vu.
Yeah, probably that or Terminator for me, I think.
Oh, really? So after all that, you still really enjoy?
Oh, you still like Terminator, even though he's got all that. Or it could be Shawshank Redemption.
Oh yes, I mean that because when he goes through the poster, obviously he goes into a different
it's a different time
zone, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You just wanted to piss me off with that comment, so I'm not rising to it. I'm not rising to it. Nice try. Corey, Tenet. You know what? I don't know what it is with Christopher Nolan. I just think he gets pleasure out of trying to mess with people's minds. I didn't particularly enjoy Tenet, to be honest. So it wasn't bad, but it wasn't, you know.
I haven't seen it, don't know anything about it.
You know what? I just haven't really enjoyed an awful lot of Christopher Nolan stuff past Inception. You know, I made this comment recently on a Facebook comment somewhere and literally got like, if I was like an antelope in the wild, it was like 50 lions just ripping me to shreds because I dare say that Christopher Nolan isn't that much of a great filmmaker anymore. And I'm just like, you know, he's just hit his peak with Inception.
Bit pretentious, if you ask me.
I agree. Corey did highlight one good film that I'm glad is getting a mention is Men in Black 3. One of the very few sequels to a franchise that I actually find to be thoroughly enjoyable. And I actually quite enjoyed how time travel was used in that one. It wasn't too complicated. It followed most of the basic rules that, you know, there was different timelines, different series of events, and, you know, and if you change something in the past, it affects it in the future, but it didn't really play that card much, you know? So it was just, again, a bit like time travel was the vehicle of the film, but there was so much more going on. One of which being, I'd like just to point out that Josh Brolin made a cracking young Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah, he did. I was going to say that, but yeah, you got me there.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where if anyone ever says, you know, actors like, you know, a bit like Michael Fassbender and Ian McKellen and McAvoy and Patrick Stewart, and they always say, which actors do you feel, you know, have really portrayed a younger version of another actor's work well? And I always go to Josh Brolin with Tommy Lee Jones. Just very, very good. But there are a few others, to be fair. I mentioned one the other day and I said, oh, it was close. It was very close, but it wasn't quite. And I don't remember what it was. I'll have to remember. Susie says Planet of the Apes. Again, it's one of those films where time travel allowed things to happen in the film, but they didn't really focus on that element of it, did they? But good film from what I remember of it.
Are we talking about the original?
Not seen the original. I've only seen the Tim Burton one.
Oh, right, that one. Well, yeah, it's the same sort of thing. They land ostensibly in the end on Earth. So it must be in the future because the monkeys have taken over.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Yeah. No. Well, yeah, exactly. So again, time travel plays a big part in it, but not in a way that they kind of sit there and go, "Why did this happen?"
It's not the main feature of the film, is it? The time travel.
No, exactly.
It's just how it gets there.
Exactly. Corey says Star Trek as well. Yep, so many different Star Trek films have dealt with time travel. It's ridiculous. But yeah, there we go. So we hope we've covered as many of your time travel films as possible. And I hope whether you've been watching us live or whether you're listening to this in the future, then you thoroughly enjoy this. James has just asked a question. Has Disney ever done time travel? The only one that immediately pops into my mind is the newer film they made called A Wrinkle in Time, but I haven't seen it. I just know Chris Pine is in it. But yeah, I know there's a future film, the Flash film, when it comes out as part of the DC universe, they'll be dealing with time travel in that as well. So, because they're using it as a way to write Ben Affleck's Batman out of the series. So that'll be interesting. Perhaps we can come back and do this again in the future once we've seen loads more time travel films. Or maybe in the past. Who knows?
Maybe. We'll do it first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yes, so that is us wrapping up today's episode. Again, thank you, Andy, for coming along and talking about this. It's been enjoyable, and I think we've given people listening and watching a lot to think about, which I think is always, if you can, give people something to kind of take away from it, then you've done a good job in a podcast, as far as I'm concerned. Headache. So headache. Yeah, go take some aspirin or something, But yeah, no, honestly, thank you so much for coming along. And
no, it's good to be here. Good to be here.
Yeah, no, well, we'll have you back in the future, despite the fact that I think a few people in the comments found your use of certain words hilarious. I think that's a good reason to have you back in the future.
I was going to apologise as well.
No, I do not want your apology. I have every episode of this podcast has always been branded as explicit so that we can sit here and say shit like this. But yeah, no, honestly, no need to apologise. But I hope you'll one day come back in the future for another episode on a different topic that we think of.
Yep.
And also, again, one more time, thank you to the Bait Bloke, aka Dan, for sponsoring today's episode. Thoroughly appreciate it, Dan, and I hope you've been watching and enjoying. And don't forget to go and check out the Bait Bloke on Facebook and Instagram, as I will be doing, to book a Mother's Day treat, he says, as knowing his mum is watching this.
And I can have some as well.
Yes, exactly. So yes, no, don't forget to check out the Bait Bloke. Right. Thank you so much again, and thank you to everyone who's been commenting and getting involved throughout the whole thing. We'll be back, I want to say next week, but I was debating whether to do one next week or not. So I want to keep whether we come back as next week or as a surprise. If not, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. So it'll either be next week or 2 weeks after. But the next topic that we will be dealing with will be video games that have been made into films. And my special guest with that will be Shane. So yes, look forward to that episode when we get round to doing that. And once again, thank you to everyone, and thank you, Andy. And
thank you, Ross. It's been a pleasure.
No worries. Thank you, and see you all very soon.